Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, managing editor of Canada's Entrepreneur. Joining me today on Economics for Everyone is Todd Hirsch, who is an economist, speaker, and author. Thanks, Todd, for joining us today.
Always a pleasure to be here, Mario.
Okay, we're going to talk about a bit of a controversial subject, and it's the growing movement in Alberta for independence. But we're going to talk from an economic standpoint on what this all means. And first off, Todd, from an economic standpoint, what would be the biggest immediate challenges the province would face if indeed it did become independent?
Well, this is such a big question. And maybe not surprisingly to many of the viewers, we have some experience in Canada with provinces that vote to separate or have a referendum on it. And that is the experience of Quebec in 1995. There was also a referendum in 1980. But the 1995 referendum in Quebec, I think, is instructive for Alberta because it really emphasized that the big problem isn't trying to calculate, are we going to be better off financially or worse off? The problem is the uncertainty this creates. And that is, I think, for Alberta, the biggest economic loser. Yeah, people will argue different ways. How do we separate the Canada pension plan? How do we separate national debt? Even in Quebec in 1995, no one could agree on the actual numbers. But it does create so much uncertainty, and that is the biggest economic driver. From 1976, when Quebec first started electing separatist leaders in Quebec City, to well into the 2000s, when the referendum question and the question about sovereignty kind of went away. It's never entirely gone away. But in that 30-year period, we saw a mass outflow of people and money and corporate presence and influence out of Montreal toward Toronto.
Yeah.
And it was because of the uncertainty. If there's one thing businesses hate more than anything, it is the not knowing what the rules are going to be. And in 2025, businesses in this country, in the world, are dealing with so much uncertainty as it is. The
Yeah.
last thing any of them need is this question looming over their heads. Is Alberta going to separate from Canada? I totally understand people's frustration at times with Ottawa. And this week, I suppose if there is an MOU on a pipeline, that might take some of the steam out of an Alberta separatist movement. So I understand the frustration, but the uncertainty is the biggest economic negative.
Let's talk about, on the positive side, the potential advantages for Alberta if they become independent. Now, I see these numbers floating around all the time on social media that, Alberta gives X number of billions of dollars to Ottawa, and it only receives, X number of billions of dollars, which is a little bit of that total back. Are there potential advantages for Alberta to become independent?
Well, it is true. I mean, the government of Alberta, by the way, does not send money to Ottawa. It is taxpayers like you
Yeah.
and I and everyone else in Alberta. We pay the same amount of federal tax for our income as people in Prince Edward Island and Quebec and BC, every province. But it is true. There is a net outflow of wealth from Alberta towards the rest of the country. That is largely a reflection of two things. One is our demographics. We are a younger age demographic. So Albertans receive fewer Canada pension plan, old age security,
Mm.
guaranteed income supplement, all of the things related to age. That is only demographics. And the other is around, we have to also calculate Alberta has received a lot of wealth from the rest of the country in terms of educated people. So when those recent graduates from universities in Ontario or Nova Scotia or elsewhere, those are education dollars spent by the people in those provinces. Young people particularly, get their degree. They move to Alberta because often the cost of living is lower, like it is now, or the economy is a little stronger, and not at the moment. Our unemployment rate is higher than the national average. But that represents an inflow. People moving here, it represents an inflow of wealth in the form of educated brain cells in our heads. And then people tend to retire elsewhere. Using healthcare dollars in those provinces. So there's a lot of different ways to think about it. But, to your original question, would Alberta be viable? Is there a net outflow of wealth? It's a more complicated question than just saying we pay more to Canada, therefore we'd be better off. That is a simplistic and erroneous way, I think, of thinking about the economics.
Do you think that a lot of this sentiment out there all comes back down to the equalization payments and the Albertans feeling that it is very wrong and very unfair to the province?
Yeah, equalization is tricky because, but I have to say in my lifetime, I was only 1 years old at the time, but I was alive on this planet when Alberta was a net recipient of
Ah,
equalization. So there have been situations where Alberta has been on the receiving end. The reason that we are always on the out end of it, or we are a have province, never receiving, is because of an accident of geography, and it's called oil and gas deposits in this province. But that said, I totally understand people's frustration with it. Could it be redone? Could it be recalculated? It is entrenched in the Constitution of 1982, the repatriation of the Constitution. So it is hard, it would be. Ottawa doesn't even really have the option of saying we're getting rid of the program without opening the Constitution. That is a much, much bigger and more troublesome situation. Could it be, the formula recalculated in different ways? Different prime ministers, including Stephen Harper, fiddled with the formula a bit. There's always scope, I guess, to massage that. But it is something that in this country, it's entrenched in the Constitution. If we like it or not, it's not going away. But I think we just have to think about it in those terms.
hmm. So let's talk a little bit about the Alberta economy currently. What's your sense of how it's doing?
Well, it's not doing particularly well, in fact, at the moment. I mean, I should temper that. Oil prices are quite low. That does tend to be one of the bigger drivers of the economy, especially provincial government finances. We are the main benefit that Alberta is receiving economically is that people are still moving here in droves. And when they move here, they bring their consumer spending power. They bring their education, they bring their skills. All of this is positive for Alberta's economy. But our unemployment rate is actually higher than the national average, close to 8%. The national average isn't even that great at around 7%. So our unemployment rate is higher than the national average. That is some of that is because so many people are moving here, and when they move here,
Yeah.
they start looking for work. They're moving here because it's more affordable, which is also a benefit. But overall, the health of Alberta's economy at the moment, I'd only give it about a B or a B minus.
Hmm. Last thing I want to talk to you about, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, is pipelines. And um, just so everybody knows, we are recording this on Tuesday, November 25th. And there are, rumblings as we speak right now that there will be some sort of, as you mentioned, MOU, something agreed upon between the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, and Premier Daniel Smith here on pipelines. How important would that be for the province?
Oh, I think it's hugely important. And I think everyone on one side or other of this separatist question in Alberta are waiting to see what happens on Thursday with this memorandum of understanding. Now, if there is an MOU on pipelines, this is only the very first baby step. This does not mean a pipeline is going to happen.
Yeah.
It just means that Ottawa is more or less on side with the idea. there are still a lot of hurdles, the biggest of which there is still no private sector pipeline company stepping up to say, yeah, we want to partner with Alberta and Ottawa and build this pipeline. That could change, maybe with an MOU from Ottawa and Alberta. That might actually give more confidence, reduce the risk of a private sector company getting involved. So we might see one step up. But my guess is, the bigger challenge is still oil's at $60 a barrel. It's not a great, even if every government, including BC, were on side, it's not a great environment right now to be building more pipelines. I think we need to see stronger oil prices over a sustained period of time. I'm getting outside of my area of expertise because I'm not an energy expert by any means. But I think the big thing still lacking, as the Premier of BC points out every day, there is no private sector partner yet willing to step up. So there is no project to talk about. Nonetheless, the announcement, if there is one on Thursday, the memorandum of understanding between Ottawa and Alberta will be really interesting to watch.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Todd, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, that was Todd Hirsch, an author, speaker, and economist based in Calgary. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, managing editor of Canada's Entrepreneur. Thanks for joining us today.